One of the problems that we have is that everyone has heard about Meir Kahane, and so few have heard Meir Kahane. Nothing that has happened in this area today has not happened to me in every other city. I came to debate and was met with defamation. And defamation is the last refuge of non-thinkers. People who cannot debate, who cannot answer, who cannot think, will call names. The issues that I raise are issues that hold within them the very future of Israel, indeed the very future of the Jewish people. And they're issues that have to be addressed. And whether one likes my answers or not, at least listen to the problems. And if you don't like my answer, the question that is posed to you is, well, what is your answer? And to say, well, I have no answer, is not an answer. I watched on television some of the comments made by some of your local rabbis and one local leader, Morton Ruwak. Morton Ruwak is not a person, he's a concept. One finds Morton Ruwak in every city. Jewish leaders who were chosen not for their scholarship, and not for their knowledge, and not for their Jewishness, but for their money, who babble about Jewish concepts, that Meir Kahane goes against Judaism. Your secular Jewish leaders in these twin cities would not know a Jewish concept if they fell over one. What we're dealing with is a continuation of Jewish leadership in this country, which was so responsible in the 1940s, in their own way, in their own silence, for the death of so many Jews in the Holocaust. They dared to speak about Jewishness and commitment to love of people. As early as 1942, 3 years before World War II ended, the American Jewish leadership knew that a Holocaust was taking place, that 12,000 Jews were being murdered each and every single day, that the Jews of Hitler's Europe were appealing to them to cry out, to shake the world. The man that the Allies bombed the railroad lines leading to Auschwitz and to the other death camps, so as to put the bridges and the railroad lines out of commission so that in one day 12,000 Jews would be saved. And for 2 days, 24,000 Jews. And a week, and 2 weeks, they shook the world. The B'nai B'rith shook the world. The American Jewish Congress shook the world. I remember these leaders. Had they marched to Washington, had the same Jewish leaders who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King in the 1960s, when the question wasn't Jewish lives, civil rights, which is an important issue, but it's not Jewish lives. The same ones who marched for every cause in the world in the 1960s did not march for Jewish lives in the 1940s. Had the B'nai B'rith and the American Jewish Congress and the committee and the federations and the JCRCs closed shop for a day and led 100,000 Jews to Washington to sit down on Pennsylvania Avenue. They're opposed to violence, good, nonviolence. What Dr. Martin Luther King did for his people. Sit down on Pennsylvania Avenue, block traffic, pound the pavement and shout that well-known Jewish chant, hell no, we won't go, bomb Auschwitz. They went to Washington. What would have happened had they done that? What would have happened had 100,000 Jews led by Dr. Stephen Wise and his wise men of Chelm? What if they would have gone to Washington and sat down and the police would have come and said, get up, or what would have happened? They would have been arrested. They would have been arrested. So what? You're in and out. Believe me, take it from me. You're in and out. But more important, the next day, every newspaper in the world would have had headline stories, Jewish leaders demand bombing of death camps, and they would have been bombed. They dare speak to me of love of Jews? Why didn't they do that? Because they were as terrified then as they are today at this moment of what will the Goyim say, what will the Gentiles say. That's what paralyzed them then, and that's why these wimps today got up and spoke to the Gentiles. Kahane doesn't speak for us, because God forbid, what will the Gentiles say? What they don't realize is that the Gentiles agree with Kahane more than they agree with them.
Following Kahane's prepared remarks, he fielded questions from the audience. Most focused on his views towards Arabs living in Israel.
You criticize Jewish liberals for, as you put it, believing that you can buy Arabs. Is that correct? Yet the first half of your solution is to say to Arabs in Israel, go and I'll pay you. So obviously you don't believe the first part of your solution, because that would be buying Arabs. The second part of your solution was, if you stay and don't accept your role as a non-citizen, I'll have to kill you. You can't believe as a rabbi that that's a realistic solution.
First of all, let's get one thing clear. I don't say that I want to buy them. What I am telling them is, you are going. You're going. To make it easier, you're going to go, and Kahane means it. And to make it easier, those who go quietly will get compensation, and those that don't won't get a penny. I'm convinced that on the day that the Arabs put on their radios in Israel and hear that Kahane is now the prime minister, they'll go. Oh, well, there you go. I remember when Menachem Begin took over in 1977. For 2 months, the Arabs sat in terror. They were convinced that Begin would either kill them or throw them out. And after 2 months passed, they saw this wasn't Begin already. And that was a tragedy. He already wasn't Begin. I'm not paying them to go. I'm saying, you're going. The question is how? With money or without? I don't want to kill Arabs. And I say that again. Arabs will be killed if they stay in the country. When they riot, you think that any government of Israel is going to tell the army, let them riot? Even if Abba Eban would be the prime minister, God forbid. He wouldn't let that happen. Let me just tell you a quick story. When I was on army duty in Samaria, so the Arabs rioted in various cities. In Ramallah, near where I was, they rioted too. So they sent me to put down the riots in Ramallah. Word spread through that town in 5 minutes that Kahane was there. And the rioting stopped. And not one Arab was killed. In Hebron and in Shem, Arabs were killed. I think that the name Kahane, certainly as prime minister, with the army under him, will serve as a guide to the perplexed. You didn't speak yet? You in the back.
A few years ago, you sent a letter to my village in Jerusalem.
Your village? Which one?
Shofar.
Shofar.
In Jerusalem. You sent a letter to the people, to the Mukhtar over there, and you asked the people to leave the village and to Jordan.
Right.
And to ask the Israeli government for some money. That means you guys give us some money and we leave the village. That means you, in this case, you buy us. So you pay us the money and we leave the land. Okay? When I heard that, I said, well, Mr. Kahane, I used to take a good idea about you. That Mr. Kahane, he doesn't do that. I mean, a man like in your position, how come he do this thing? You buy the people, you pay them the money, because you know that this is their land, and you just pay them the money to leave the land. So, I mean, you believe this is our land.
Did you see the letter?
Yes, I did.
Well, the letter said it offered you three choices, because that's what it says in the Talmud. It gave you the choice to stay in the land as non-citizens. It gave you the choice to leave the country. And I said, and if you do, we will pay you for your property, not to pay you to leave your property behind. We'll buy the property. That's what it said. Or thirdly, if not, we'll throw you out. That's what the thing said. It's not your land. It's not your land. And I must tell you, many of my members are upset about any offer to pay compensation, because most of my members come from Arab countries, and they left behind billions of dollars of property.
I mean, if you're going to pay me some money for this table,
you're right. You're right. I promise you that you'll leave without any money. Soviet Jewry. Today, your local leaders speak constantly about Soviet Jewry, and temples have signs saying Soviet Jews. I remember when that was not so. I remember when no one was speaking of Soviet Jewry. I remember when temple rabbis were involved in such Jewish issues as lettuce and grapes, and Angela Davis, in Vietnam and Cuba. Who spoke of Soviet Jewry? The Soviet Jewish issue, the tragedy began in 1917. When was the first demonstration for Russian Jews in the Twin Cities? In the 20s? In the 1930s? In the 40s? In the 50s? In the 60s? The Soviet Jewish issue was put on page one by Jewish militants who went out into the streets and did things that nice Jewish boys and girls are not supposed to do. Violence. I want to see whether the Jewish leadership will put out a flyer against violence by the African National Congress. Theirs is a selective condemnation of violence. A bomb by the African National Congress is, of course, a freedom bomb, and we applaud that. Bombs on behalf of our Soviet Jewish brothers and sisters who for 50 years had cried out and no one gave a damn and no one heard them. That's not a good bomb. These same people, these same groups, I remember as a child saying and writing the same things about Menachem Begin and the Irgun. If there would not have been a Begin and then Irgun, there would not be today the state of Israel that these people can visit, expense-paid trips paid by Jewish funds. Yes, we used violence against the Russians. Of course we did. Because we tried everything else their way for 50 years. For 50 years we were told by these dwarfs, these pygmies, quiet diplomacy. We are doing things through quiet diplomacy. It was so quiet it didn't exist. The news media here. You know what they want? They want violence. That's what they enjoy. That's what becomes headlines. We gave them violence, and they put the Soviet-Jewish issue on page 1. And suddenly every farmer in Minnesota knew that there was a Soviet-Jewish problem. The indictment goes on and on. These Jewish leaders have a direct hand in the spiritual Holocaust that is taking place at this moment among Jews. We are losing our young Jews. There's a cancer raging, assimilation, intermarriage, alienation. They are the ones that caused it. The B'nai B'rith with, and the American Jewish Congress with the melting pot. For decades we heard the 11th Jewish commandment, thou shalt melt. For decades we heard from the B'nai B'rith, send your children to public school, not to day schools. Send your children to public school because it's important that they meet all kinds. And then when they met all kinds and brought them home, the parents said, Gewalt, where did you meet her? For decades, they fought the great battle. The battle to make sure that the local country club is forced to allow Jews to join. That was their problem, that the country club didn't allow in Jews. That was their problem. In any court case between a Gentile country club that doesn't want Jews and the B'nai B'rith, I'm on the side of the country club. Our youngsters are victims. We've destroyed them. Bernie goes to school in Berkeley or in Austin or in Emory. And he comes home to his parents in Minneapolis or St. Paul or Great Neck or Greater Neck or Greatest Neck, whichever way the Jew conjugates his suburbs. And he comes home with his girlfriend, Bridget. Bernie takes Bridget home to meet his parents. Says, Father, Mother, Mazel Tov, we're getting married. What can his parents tell him? In 25,000 words or more, they can't logically tell him why he should marry a pretty girl, an intelligent girl, and a nice girl, merely because she doesn't keep the Sabbath like Bernie's mother. So what do? They send them to the temple rabbi, the rabbi, the temple, the rabbi on the island. Everything in modern Jewish time starts with a definite article. Now this rabbi opposes Kahane with a passion that borders on the pathological. He is one of the great anti-racists of our time. Just the previous Sabbath, he has given one of the most fiery, stirring sermons against the butchers of South Africa. And indeed, the previous Sabbath, he gave one of the great sermons of the decade as he proved conclusively beyond the shadow of a doubt that the Bible is made up of myths from Sumer and Babylon. He is one of the great scholars of ours. And now this non-racist, this anti-racist, has to tell Bernie why he shouldn't marry a pretty girl, an intelligent girl, and a nice girl merely because she's not Jewish. What can he say? What can he say? What can this ignoramus, whose greatest mazel is that his congregation knows less than he does? What can he say to tell Bernie? What can he say? Why be Jewish? The only thing that he can come up with is, Bernie, Judaism is ethical. Was there ever a greater racist? Catholics can't be ethical. Protestants can't be ethical. Buddhists can't be ethical. Atheists can't be ethical. Bankrupt all of them. And they dare to speak to me. These people who are the cause of an intermarriage rate in this area of over 60%.
Could you elaborate on your views on intermarriage? Explain why intermarriage shouldn't be viewed as a method of promoting understanding between people, and why your own position is not racist.
And my wife?
And why your position on intermarriage is
not
not
racist.
racist.
Oh. Well, first of all, my position is clear. It's not my position. It's Judaism's position. It's in the Bible. Let me finish. I mean, you asked a question, a good question. Now wait for an answer, a good answer. Now, in the 5th book of Moses, Deuteronomy, chapter 7, there is a commandment that you shall not intermarry. And there's a reason for it. Not that we have anything against Gentiles. We want our children to carry on as Jews. We believe that God gave us a law at Sinai. We want to carry that down, to pass down that torch. If they intermarry, chances are excellent that it's not going to happen. At the very, very best, what they'll say is, let the kid choose his own religion. One of the great moments of Jewish history. Therefore, that's the only reason. Not because Gentiles are inferior, superior. It's because Jews should marry Jews so as to have Jewish children who will carry on that torch from Sinai. Racism, understand, we have started using words with no meaning. Racism, to me, words are a tool. And they have meanings, precise meanings. Racism is based upon race. This is a religious question. A religious question. If a Catholic wants to marry a non-Catholic, the church insists that the child be raised as a Catholic. If the non-Catholic spouse or partner is not willing, then the church will not consecrate that wedding. They'll be against that wedding. When a Muslim marries a Jew, or as in most cases, a Jewish woman, so the Qadi insists that the children be raised as Muslims, and if not, there will be no marriage. It's a religious issue. Now, either you believe in your faith or don't. I happen to. That's why I don't want it. And that's why we'll do everything to convince Jews to stay Jewish and to marry Jewish. Yes.
Just a point of clarification. How dependent is the country really on the United States for survival? That is, if the 3 billion were cut off, say, tomorrow, and we bought a shuttle instead, say, would the country be able to survive?
No country in the world ever went bankrupt. We just won't pay off debts. Look, one of our platform planks is our cutting off of all requests for economic aid from America. I believe that economic aid from this country is bad for Israel. We're a junkie, and every time we need a shot, we get a shot. That's no way to live. Israel has got to learn to stand on its own feet. Has to cut its budget, has to learn to live poor. We think that we're Rothschilds because there's an Uncle Sam. Well, we're not Rothschilds, we're poor. And we have to learn to live in that way. And we have to learn to build our economy. And we can do it. There's a lot of brains in Israel, a lot of geniuses, just free from the fetters of the bureaucrats, and we'll learn to stand on our own feet. Speak about the issues. We have a problem today in Israel. The problem is, will Israel be Israel in 10 years? The state of Israel is a product of Zionism. Theodor Herzl, in 1897, arose and wrote a book, and he called it The Jewish State. And that's Zionism. Zionism has as its purpose the creation of a Jewish state. And indeed, the Declaration of Independence of Israel declares in the Declaration, Anu machuzim bezot al hakamat medina yehudit. We hereby proclaim the establishment of a Jewish state. What does a Jewish state mean? What is its minimal definition? Leaving aside right, left, religious. What is the definition that every Zionist from right to left, from top to bottom, could accept? Why, certainly a Jewish state means a state with a majority of Jews. Obviously, if it doesn't have a majority of Jews, it is not a Jewish state. Brooklyn has a lot of Jews. A Jewish state is one which is sovereign. Independence, which is master of its own fate, finally, after having enjoyed the dubious benefits of a minority status under the Christians and Muslims for 100 years, under which we received such enjoyable luxuries as crusades and inquisitions and pogroms and Auschwitzes. We finally said thank you, but no more. We wanted a state in which we would decide our own fate. And that's a Jewish state, a majority of Jews. And that's what Zionism means. But Western democracy doesn't speak of such nonsense. Jewish state, majority Jews. Whoever's the majority is the majority. That's called Western democracy. Jews, Arabs, Chinese. Is there a contradiction? Of course there is a contradiction. Western democracy allows the Arabs to be the majority if they do it peacefully, and Zionism says never. And it's a contradiction which is so clear and so glaring. For 40 years it was buried, it was covered, it was forgotten, it was pushed aside. But it can no longer be pushed aside because the Arabs today are growing at a rate that is 4 times that of the Jews in Israel. The Arabs have babies. We have abortions. We pay the Arabs for each baby every single month from Bituach Leumi, from National Insurance. We pay a check for each baby. 1 baby, 1 check. 2 babies, 2 checks. 10 babies, 10 checks. 20 babies, a book of checks. We are not normal. We need a national couch. So they grow. Not only do they have babies and we not have babies, there is no aliyah today. Jews are not arriving in Israel. Aliyah? Which of your rabbis, which of your temple rabbis here is contemplating aliyah? When is Mort going to visit Israel for more than 4 weeks in a row? What aliyah? On the contrary, the traffic is all in the opposite direction. They're coming here. I'm sure you met a few of them here in Minneapolis and St. Paul. In Los Angeles, there are 130,000 Yehudim, Israelis, who have left. Just in one city, in Los Angeles. They have their own TV station, their own radio program, their own newspapers. If not for American immigration quotas, half of Israel would be driving taxi cabs today in New York. It's not funny. It's a tragedy. So the question is, how many Arabs will there be in 10 years? How many Arabs will sit in the Knesset in 10 years? We are a democracy, and we, of course, want them all to sit in the Knesset. Of course we want that. Right, Mort? Today we have Tufik Tubi and Tufik Zayad. How many Tufikim will there be in 10 years? The Galilee today has a majority of Arabs. That's our Northern Ireland. Wadi Ara, the area, if you travel in Israel between Afula and the coast, you will find an area in which you can count on the fingers of one hand the Jewish settlements. It's Arabs, Fahim, Taiba, Fira, Baka. Doesn't that bother you? Maybe it doesn't bother you. If someone will get up and say, look, I'm for democracy, and if the Arabs are the majority, too bad, and let Israel go. If you say that's fine, then that's being honest. If you're the enemy of the Jewish state. So we have to choose. We have to decide. But above all, we have to stop holding Arabs in contempt, as these liberals do, as these Jewish groups do. It's incredible. The contempt in which they hold Arabs. Like all liberals, they think you can buy everything. You can buy a condominium and a Cadillac and an Arab. If we raise their living standards, then they'll be good Arabs. You can't buy an Arab's national pride by giving him an indoor toilet or electricity, or by telling him, we came to the country and found the desert, and now we turned it into a garden. How many times have you heard that from the JNF or the UJ speaker at a breakfast or a brunch or a lunch or a dinner or a supper, or whichever way Jews raise money by eating? We found the desert, turned it into a garden. Try that once on an Arab, and he'll answer you, you're right. But it was my desert, now it's your garden. How will I understand Arabs? And how they understand me, and how neither of us can understand Jews. You listen to cabinet ministers in Israel. It's like out of Rudyard Kipling. We will raise their living standards. We found illiterate Arabs, and now there are 4,000 Arabs studying in the universities of Israel. Aglikenstadt. Joy shall reign. 4,000 Arabs are now studying in the university. Do you know who the most dangerous Arabs of Israel are? The students in the university. The revolution doesn't come from the numb and the dumb. It comes from the intellectuals that we, in our benighted Jewish insanity, are training. Full scholarships. That's the PLO leadership. Tomorrow, that. What's going to be? The contemporary. They ask me, aren't there any good Arabs? How many Jews have it? But aren't there any good Arabs? What an unbelievable question. They're all good Arabs. The problem is that behind that question lies a contempt. What the Jewish leader means when he asks, aren't there any good Arabs? By a good Arab, he means an Arab who will, despite the fact that he believes that it is his country and that we stole it, nevertheless will accept the fact that it is now Israel. That's a good Arab. A good Quisling. A good Arab, they're all good Arabs. Because to me, a good Arab is like a good Jew. A good Jew is someone who wants Israel to be a Jewish state. A good Arab is someone who wants Israel to be a Palestine. I respect the Arab. You can't buy him. You think, is there one person in this room who thinks that there is one Arab in Israel? One! Who enjoys living in a country called the Jewish state? How would you like living in Jerry Falwell's Christian state? That's how he loves that.
In the last year and a half or 2 years, you've become much more popular in Israel with the Israelis. when the next elections come in 2 years or so, and you are planning on, and the reason why you've become more in power in the last year and a half is the troubles and the terrorism and that. In 2 years, when elections come and you're planning on trying to get in power and enact your plan, what is your plan to become prime minister?
We expect to be the third party in the Knesset. We expect to get in a ballpark figure of about 10 seats. The Likud will not be able to form a nationalist government without Kach. And we're going to insist upon the first steps towards what we hope will be an implementation of our plan. For example, I believe that Bituach Leumi, the National Insurance Institute, should be taken from the government where it is now and put into the Jewish agency. And as not being part of the government, that the check should be paid to Jews only. If Arabs want babies, let them pay for it. Yeah, that's the way it goes, kid. I'm waiting for the first checks to the Jews of Syria for having babies. Now, I believe that all Arabs at the age of 18 in Israel should go into national service. Not in the army. That's the only thing I missed. Work for their country for 3 years. Why should Jews be the only friaring around? I want that. In other words, I want it to be made clear that these are the first steps, even when we're not in power yet. And I want to move the Likud closer to us, and they will, because if they don't, they're gonna lose even more seats to us. So that's the actual thing. I think that that we're on our way. I think that all those youngsters who today are 12 and 13 and 14, and who have never seen Begin, don't know about Begin. They only know Kahane. In the election after this one, they're going to be voters, and that's when we move, really move. Is there one person in this room who thinks that there's one Arab in Israel who enjoys living in a country which has a law of return that applies to Jews only? Other way. That law of return. If there would be no such thing today, no law of return, and I tomorrow morning would come and propose a bill in the Knesset, quoting word for word the law of return, do you know what they would call me? I didn't write the law of return. Ben Gurion did. It applies to Jews only. The Jewish National Fund bylaws state that public lands may be leased to Jews only. I wrote the Jewish National Fund bylaws. I'm waiting for a statement about the Jewish National Fund bylaws from Rabbis Gordon, Raskin, Brown, Baskin, Lerner, Wise, Citron, etc. And of course from Morton. Is there one person in this room who thinks that there is one Arab in Israel who enjoys singing his national anthem? What is his national anthem? What is the national anthem of the Arabs of Israel? Hatikva. Think of the pride that coursed through his veins as he stands up and he sings the words, Nefesh Yehudi Homiyah, the soul of a Jew yearns. Oh, he just breaks down. The emotion is just too much for him. And as he finishes on a crescendo, Hatikva bat shnot alpayim, the hope of 2,000 years, a tear trickles down his cheek as he thinks, how my Zaidi waited 2,000 years for the Jews to come home. Hatikva means the hope. It was our hope. It was his nightmare. Is there one person in this room who thinks that there's one Arab in Israel who on Yom Ha'atzmaut, Independence Day, rushed out into the street to celebrate his defeat? The contemporary Arabs is unbelievable. The Arab believes it's his country. He believes all of it is his country. He believes that we are thieves. He believes that Kahane is a thief, and so is Mort. The difference is, Kahane is an honest thief, and Mort is Nebuch Mort. This is the problem. And we had better face it. Because in 10 years, there will be a bloody civil war inside Israel. I don't hate Arabs. I love Jews. Sometimes that is not easy. I wish the Arabs well elsewhere. I don't want to kill Arabs. On the contrary, Arabs will be killed if they stay in the country. There'll be Arabs killed every single day by soldiers. And you'll see it on TV, and you'll watch all of the major channels every single night showing Jews killing Arabs. I don't want that to happen. The answer is a simple one. Painful one, but simple. The Arabs must be given a choice. Those who wish to stay in the country may indeed do so, with all their personal rights, cultural rights, and religious rights, economic rights, social rights, but no national rights. They don't vote. They're not citizens. They choose that. If not, they must go. We took in 800,000 Sephardic Jews who fled Arab countries. They came from Morocco, and from Algeria, and from Tunis, and from Libya, and from Egypt, and from Turkey, from Iraq, and from Syria, and from Persia, and from Yemen. We took in 800,000 Jews who fled and left behind every penny and did receive a penny of compensation. Well, that's phase one. We took in Jews from Arab countries to Zion. Now the time has come to complete the exchange of populations. We took in Jews, give them Arabs. I'm better than they. I'm ready to pay compensation. The Poles and the Czechs, two wonderful countries because they are socialist states. In 1945, the Poles and the Czechs expelled 12 million ethnic Germans from their countries, people who had lived there for centuries. If anyone knows anything about pre-World War II history, he knows why. The Germans in Danzig, in Silesia, Sudetenland served as a fifth column for Hitler. After World War II, the Poles and Czechs licked their wounds, their bitter wounds, and in their own way they said, never again. And they threw them out. And no one sat scratching his Polish head saying, but what will the world say? And stop telling Polish jokes. They're smarter than we are. Start telling Jewish ones. I want the Arabs to live happily anywhere in their 22 countries. They have 22 countries and we have one. And on that there's no compromise. I have no intention of losing my state to Arab bullets or to Arab babies. I have no guilt feelings. Guilt is the Jewish AIDS. Jews have honed guilt to a fine art. Human beings breathe oxygen. Jews breathe guilt. We apparently cannot exist. We can't survive without guilt. The corrosiveness of guilt and self-hate. Christians kill Muslims. In Beirut, we beat our breasts. It doesn't matter what happens. Maybe we're to blame. Well, I have no guilt. It's better to be a winner than to be a loser. And it's better to live than to die. And it's better to have a state of Israel that is hated by the whole world than an Auschwitz that's loved by it. What will the world say? Who cares what they'll say? They say it anyhow. When Menachem Begin bombed the reactor in Baghdad, for a month the world went crazy. It was frightening. I couldn't sleep for a month. I was so terrified. Protested for a month, demonstrations and condemnations in the UN and the Council, and then it stopped. They found another issue, and there was no reactor. Well, that's what will happen. For a month, for 2 months, they'll scream and they'll protest, and then they'll find another issue. And there won't be Arabs. What will America say? What makes you think America will say anything? What makes you think that the American people here give a damn about Jews or Arabs? The Americans care about Americans, which is normal. America doesn't back Israel because there's a love affair between Reagan and Shamir. America backs Israel out of self-interest. That's the name of the game in this world. There are no friends, there are no allies, there are only interests. Reagan wants a strong anti-Soviet ally in that region, so he has a choice, Israel or Oman. It's time for us to stop behaving like some shtetl beggar, as if they are doing us favors. Israel gives as much as it gets. Who flew F-16s for the Americans in real combat in Lebanon and then told them what was wrong with the planes? We did. How much is that worth? Who put out the Soviet missiles and then shot down 81 Syrian planes with a loss of 0 and then told the Americans? How much is that worth? Who captured the first T-72 Soviet tank and showed it to the CIA? How much is that worth? If it's not worth anything, don't give us a penny and you won't get anything from us either. If it's worth it, then give the money as partners, and stop fetching.
You should renounce your U.S. citizenship if you are a member of parliament in another country.
Well, then you can take that to the High Court. Because they rule.
It's not easy for me to do that, unfortunately. I am a working Jew.
Well, you don't know how hard I work to try and save you.
Thank you. I'll work on it myself.
Good, but in the meantime...
You're working on saving yourself. Are you going to renounce your U.S. citizenship?
No, of course not. Of course not. And now, wait. Oh, an attorney now. The ACLU, which is my attorney in this case, ACLU, miracles will never cease. ACLU doesn't think as you think. The ACLU, which is fighting this, and which believes that the Grenadian ambassador to the UN, who at this moment is a U.S. citizen, and Golda Meir, who at her death was still a U.S. citizen, and Moshe Aarons for 15 years in the Knesset was a U.S. citizen, and they never bothered them. You know why they bother me? Because that's Kahane. We're going to win the case, no doubt about it. And when we win it, and when we open their files and find the letters between the Israeli government asking this government to open charges against Kahane, then you'll understand why the case was opened.
Israel has always been a minority people in the world, even in their land. Is it necessary that they have to be in a majority all the time to control the land? Because history seems to bear out they've always been a minority people.
You're right. I'm sick and tired of that. I don't want to be anymore. I don't want any more intolerance or tolerance. I don't want to be tolerated anymore. I want my own country. Is that asking too much? My country, in which my ancestors lived, in which we were driven out, I don't want to be a minority again, ever again. Kahane incites the Arabs. I incite the Arabs. I incite the Arabs. Of course, why didn't I think of that before? In 1929, in one day in Hebron, the Arabs murdered 67 Jews. Kahane incited them. Only one problem. Wasn't born yet. In 1920, they massacred Jews in Jaffa. In 1921, in the Old City, Jerusalem. The same place where Jews are attacked every single day today. Who incited them in the 20s? Kahane, who wasn't born? Begin, who was a child in Poland? Between 1936 and 1938, 510 Jews were massacred by Arabs. Who incited them then? What was the problem then? Who was talking about driving Arabs out then? Peace now. Peace now. Peace now. I sit in Israel and I listen to them as they say, the obstacle to peace in the region, the occupied lands of 1967. See, that's the obstacle to peace, the occupied lands of 1967. Oh, to be as clever as peace now. I just drew with jealousy and envy. Now I understand why they started with us in all. Now I know why in 1937 they were massacring Jews because of the occupied lands of 1967. Oh, why didn't I think of that myself? In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan, which would have set up a Jewish state, a tiny, grotesque, absurd one, and an Arab state, which might have, for want of some better name, been called Palestine. Or as they say, Palestine. But the Arabs said no. They went to war in 1947. You know why? Because of the occupied land of 1967, undoubtedly, indubitably. 67. I was on a radio program today. KOUM, KMOU, something like that. 770. Something like that. And I was on with my telephone, the professor from Brigham Young, an Arab. And he said, well, it's true that we wanted to wipe out Israel in 1947, but you can't tell today what we'll be thinking tomorrow. So we've now changed our mind. That's true. So if we give them back the lands of 1967, you can't tell today what they'll think tomorrow. We have concepts today. There are now moderate Arabs. It's a new concept, moderate Arabs. It's like moderate terrorists who presumably kill Jews moderately. Moderate Arabs. There are moderate Arabs today like King Hussein, the little dwarf. He's a moderate. I don't know why he's a moderate. He's small. It's just short. This is a moderate. No question about it. King Hussein, who every single day gets up and says there will never be peace until Israel gives up the West Bank, as he calls it, and East Jerusalem. And then, of course, there will be peace, of course, certainly. In 1967, who do you think had the West Bank and East Jerusalem? The Hadassah? Mort? King Hussein had the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and he went to war. Now, if someone has East Jerusalem and he goes to war, is it logical to assume that he might want West Jerusalem? Or West Haifa? Or Tel Aviv? There were no Arab moderates. There were two kinds of Arabs, clever ones and stupid ones. The stupid ones say what they mean. Down with Israel, into the sea. Clever ones, they mean the same thing, but They're clever. They've learned if you say nice things about Jews, they'll throw money at you or the Sinai. If we have no right to Hebron, we have no right to Tel Aviv. Abraham never walked on Dizengoff Street. But Abraham lived, died, and is buried in Hebron. And our claim to a Tel Aviv, which was built in 1905, is based only upon our claim to a Hebron in which we lived 4,000 years ago. Palestinians? What Palestinians? There is no such name. Do you know where the name Palestine came from? The Roman Emperor Hadrian, after he crushed the revolt of Bar Kokhba, determined to eliminate the last vestige of Jewishness from that country, and he changed the name from Judea to Palestina after the Philistines. What if he hadn't changed it? What if he had been in a... Hadrian wakes up in a good mood. Does not change the name. Keeps the name Judea. And throughout the ages, it goes down, Judea, Judea. We would now be fighting the Judean terrorists in normal cases. An existing people gives its name to a country. The Franks called it France. The Angles called it England. The Germanic tribes called it Germany. Only in this insanity does a Roman invent the name, change the country's name. The Arabs come in and voila, they become Palestinians. If he had named it Disneyland, can you imagine? No guilt. No guilt. We owe the world nothing. Nothing. The Arabs want a state. God bless them. Let them create a state in Jordan and call it Palestine. Let them call it anything. I don't care what they call it. Since Jordan is not a legal state anyhow. The League of Nations created a mandate in 1919 and gave the British that mandate to create a Jewish state on both sides of the Jordan. And the British, by fiat in 1922, cut off the East Bank for the grandfather of this dwarf. And they called it Transjordan. It was illegal, against law, international law, was not recognized by anyone. Call it Palestine. 80% of the people there anyhow are Palestinians.
I must say that I respect you very much for your candor and your honesty. I've made it my business to study Jewish people history, and Jewish people have suffered a great deal. I can respect the fact that such great leaders as Theodore Herzl, as well as Vladimir Jabotinsky, if one goes back and really analyze the history of many people who were Jewish that tried to cooperate in many countries, I think it's unanimous that the Jewish people do deserve a home state. They have to protect their interests as the United States, as the Soviet Union, or any people, as my own people in Africa should take the responsibility. I think one of the most incredible things that I respect about you is the love that you express for your people. I think is very well founded on the wisdom of understanding how many of your people suffer. And many of the extreme things that people have said about you, I must say that I truly respect the fact that I think much of your knowledge is based on hard facts. So it's a real honor to have the opportunity to listen to you speak, and I'm very grateful.
People from this side here, yes. With the beard, yeah.
You say that Israel exists, or that Jews are in Israel because God gave us the land and the Bible says so and so forth. Do you think that's the only justification for Jews being in Israel, for Zionism, for the state of Israel? Are there any other more secular justifications?
No, I think that's certainly the historical fact. The historical fact that Jews live there, of course, carries weight. However, if you argue with what the Arabs on that, and simply say, in terms of history, we live there, and so on. Then they'll come back with this. Well, look, you lived there once, and the Canaanites lived there once, and you go up the Canaanites, and that will drive you out, and so on and so forth. And so just know that if you use the argument of history, know that argument is what you'll have to counter. But I certainly do believe that there is an argument of history, certainly so. Of course. But to me, the major argument is that God gave us the land. And I say that was I'm an Orthodox Jew. I certainly don't discount other arguments. Far from it. Just as when I speak about the question of the Arab status in Israel, there is a halachic answer to it, there is a Zionist answer to it, and there's a logical answer to it, and they're all the same answer. So history certainly carries great weight in the argument for Jews being inside Israel, certainly. We have people that haven't spoken. Yes, you haven't spoken.
Do you think that the president of Israel should visit Germany? And if so, does that mean the relations between the two countries are normal in the sense that Israel has normal relationships with Holland?
No, I don't think that Herzog should visit Germany. I think it's obscene. I don't think that Israel should have relations with Germany. I think that's obscene. After the Inquisition in Spain, the rabbis imposed a 500-year ban on Spain. 7 years after Auschwitz, we already had a German embassy in Tel Aviv. Not in Jerusalem yet, the chutzpah. And the answer is, for money, we sold out 6 million Jews. Now, I don't say that the individual German did anything wrong. A German who was 30 or let's say 40 did not do anything. And I don't blame him. And I'll speak with Germans, and I do speak with Germans. But on a national level, it's too early. It's too early yet. And who are we to forgive for what was done to 6 million other people? Who are we to forgive? When they forgive, then you can forgive. I think it's an outrage to walk there, and it was even worse when the German president came to Israel and the Israeli band played Deutschland über alles. I think that was... The Queen of Holland wanted to go to Indonesia, to Japan. And the Dutch Parliament voted that she not be allowed to go because of what the Japanese did to the Dutch in Indonesia in World War II. Now, that's called national pride. How do you compare what the Japanese did to the Dutch to what the Germans did to the Jewish people? No, it's too early. Herzog should stay home. It's a disgrace to go to visit with Kohl, who went to Bitburg with Reagan. I think that there is such a lack of self-pride, of national pride. That's what I think. I want to get people that haven't spoken. You haven't spoken, right?
Do you believe what Hitler did?
Do I believe?
Do you agree with it?
No.
Okay. Do you believe the flow of Palestinians cross the river from Palestine?
Do I? Yes.
Do you believe it?
Yes, I do.
Look what happened to Hitler. It was his turn. Your turn will come too, you know.
We'll see.
What happened to Hitler could happen to you too.
What happened to Moses could happen to me too. Anything can happen to anybody. But in the meantime, I'm going to do what I said. And we'll see what happens. We'll see. Please God, inshallah, things will be good. Inshallah, there will be a Jewish state. Inshallah, there will be a Palestinian state in Jordan. Please God. Yes, Jaffa, right?
Right in Jerusalem.
I want to hire you too. It's just a pleasure to have them say what I want them to say. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you. Yeah.
One of my problems is not really the Arab Israelis. But what I want to know is, like, in the paper Thursday, January 22nd, they were talking about you preach for a racially pure Jewish state. Now, I know earlier you said that Judaism is a religion.
Right, exactly.
I'm getting mixed up because I also hear you talk about, and not only you, but other European Jews about a racially pure. I would like to know, well, what race are you talking about then?
I'm not talking about any race. Half of what is in this
Why
paper.
do the black Jews have a lot of problems? Why are they suffering racism? I mean, I don't understand that you kick the African American Jews out of Israel. I mean, the Ethiopian Jews, the children of the house of faith of Israel, are suffering racism and stuff. And, you know, the thing about it is that brother was talking about African history. Well, if he knew anything about African history, he would have said something to you about Mount Sinai being in Africa. And I doubt seriously that the Jews of that time looked like you, man. They came from Mount Sinai. I know a lot of European Jews don't like to hear it. But, you know, I mean, history is history, man.
Yeah.
And another statement you made about the African National Congress.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the African National Congress would feel better towards you, or, you know, not be against you, if you didn't help sell arms to the South African government that are slaughtering black people wholesale. And you support the diamonds there in business that also are doing the black people wrong. Not just you, but other European Jews like yourself. The truth hurts, don't it?
Wait until the answer. First of all, I must say, I have to first of all preface something. One of the problems with people is that it's in the paper, therefore it's true. Whoever Martha Sawyer Allen is, just because she wrote it, it's not true. I don't speak ever about a racially pure state because Jews are not a race, period. Good. Now to get back to what you said. Half of what is in this paper is not true, and the other half is false. Now, back to what you said. First of all, about the blacks in Israel. A black who converts to Judaism is a Jew, period. Just
European Judaism? I want to know what gives Europeans the right to dictate the African Jews, the original people of the earth. Not
wait. You know,
but proven scientifically.
I stood here quietly listening to you speak, and you asked a long question. I was quiet. Now it's my turn. Judaism, Judaism, declares that anyone, whether he's white, black, or polka dot, can be a Jew, period. Equal, period. The Ethiopian Jews are Jews. The black Hebrews are not black Hebrews. They're a bunch of thugs from Chicago who were thrown out of Liberia in 1967 when they went there because the Liberians have brains and Israel doesn't. Carter holds press conferences in Israel in which he states that they are the real Jews and that when they're the majority, they're going to take the whites, the so-called white Jews are frauds, and throw them out. Excuse me. Look, one more time, if you stop me, I'm going to just stop speaking to you and get there. But I'm not done. The truth hurts. Right away.
Don't hurt me, man. I mean, the Mount Sinai never doesn't
Leave it alone. I mean, look, I don't care if Mount Sinai is in Antarctica. I mean, actually, Jews look like penguins. I want you to know that. Now, look.
What about the ANC?
I'm coming to that. When we take power, we're going to throw the black Hebrews out of the country. Not because they're black, but because they're anti-Semites. And the Ethiopian Jews, please God, will live happily ever after with their Jewish brothers and sisters of all colors, because they are Jewish. After 1973, every black African state cut its ties with Israel. And vote after vote after vote, the black African states condemned Israel. And now you're upset because Israel, being smacked around by the black states, supports a South Africa which backs it. I'm not interested in any power against it, but in the UN, when you vote on it, you're my enemy. You're my enemy. You're my enemy. Maybe not a capable one, maybe not a powerful one, but you think I'm crazy to turn over a country which has the second largest amount of minerals, uranium in the entire world, to people that are pro-PLO? What, am I crazy? Is this going to be a Jewish state or a pale carbon copy of Times Square or Beverly Hills? Are we going to have a Jewish state, or are we going to produce a nation of Hebrew-speaking Gentiles with all of the non-Jewish culture? Here in Israel, you put on Galei Tzahal, the army radio station. If you're lucky, you'll hear a Hebrew song. If you're not, you'll feel right at home. The tragedy is that our youngsters in Israel don't know what being Jewish is. They're Israelis, they're not Jews. And if you're not a Jew, and if you don't feel that there's something special about being a Jew, you're not going to stay for long in a country which offers you nothing but army duty for 2 years, and every year after that, to the age of 55, 35 days and 40 days on reserve duty, and heavy taxes and possible wars. You're not going to stay there unless you feel Jewish, that there's something special about being a Jew and living in the Jewish state. And if you don't feel that, and your cousin in Los Angeles writes you a letter saying Freier, which means roughly jerk, what are you doing there? Come to America, I'll get you a green card, which is Hebrew for green card. To sacrifice, you have to feel that there's something worth sacrificing. And I want the Jewish state. And I want Jewish youngsters to wake up every single morning knowing that, yes, we are a chosen people. That's racist. I invented the term chosen people. It's in the Bible 100 times over. What are we ashamed of? We stood at Mount Sinai and we heard God speak. And we were indeed chosen. What are we ashamed of? I want Jewish youngsters to know that there is something special about being Jewish. And I want them to know what that being special is. It's not our blood. Jewish blood is no different from anyone else's blood. And it's not our skin. Jewish skin is not different from anyone else's skin. And it's not that vaunted Jewish head. That famous Jewish head. I have bad news for you. Sit quietly while I break this to you gently. There were some smart Gentiles. I hate to say this. And there were some dumb Jews. The Jewish head is not any smarter than the Gentile head, and that's not what makes Jews different and Jews special. There is only one thing that we have that no one else has, and that's a Torah. And we took that special thing and we threw it away for a melting pot. So that then there will be no because if we're different, then they'll hate us. And of course, if we're not different, they love us. They love us. Jewish leaders here sit and haven't got the slightest idea of the anti-Semitism that is raging in this country. What Gentiles do they meet up with? They come to dinners of national conference, Christians and Jews, more than the Christians. And they sit and exchange conversation and compliments and plaques. Your plaque, my plaque, my plaque, my plaque, my plaque. And you think that that's where you'll find out what people think about Jews? There's only one place, and if I had it in my power, I would compel Mort to go for a week, every night for a week, into a bar. Not a trendy bar. I mean a neighborhood bar, and sit and listen as the schnapps goes in, what comes out. Oh, the jealousy and all the envy and all the hatred. And the Jews run this and the Jews own this and Jews. And that's when times are good. Oh, God forbid should there be an economic crash in this country. God forbid. It's the Jews who will be the scapegoat, not the blacks. The anti-Semites blame Jews for everything, including blacks. They sit and they play games with themselves. The incidence of anti-Semitism have dropped by 7%. They play games. The average synagogue, which is vandalized, rushes to paint it over quickly and never reports it. If you speak to Mort and say, Kahane spoke about anti-Semitism, he'll say, Kahane's paranoid. This isn't Germany. He's right. This isn't Germany. And I have news for him. Neither was Germany once. And in Germany, when those few Jews started saying, Hitler is dangerous, they said, what are you, crazy? This isn't Poland. You're right. It wasn't Poland. Poland was Poland, Germany was Germany, and America. Only racists think that the Germans were different. Germans weren't different. Germans don't have horns, and Germans don't have tails. Germans are people like everyone else, and I can name you 10 different peoples in Eastern Europe who were more anti-Semitic than the Germans were. The Ukrainians, and the Lithuanians, and the Slovaks, they just loved us to death. If anything, if you would have asked a Jew in 1920 who were the best of the peoples, he would have said the Germans. They were the most cultured. They were the most civilized. They had Goethe and Kant and Beethoven. Indeed, the German Jew didn't call himself a Jew. He called himself a German of the Mosaic persuasion. And when Hitler rose and cried out, Juden, 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 Jews, 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 the German Jews said, he doesn't mean me. He means the Ostjuden, the East European Jews with the black coats and beards. He hated those Jews more than the Germans did. But Hitler meant all Jews, the beards and the beardless, the circumcised and the those whose mothers were not Jewish and whose grandmother wasn't Jewish, but he was still a Jew. And the Germans did that not because they were inherently evil people. It's not true. They did it because there was a terrible, terrible crash, and people lost their jobs, and people lost their hopes. And someone rose and said, I'll give you hope. And they followed him because he gave them hope. You want to tell me that could not happen here? You want to say that could not happen here? If God forbid there's an economic crash and they take away the Super Bowl? Of course it can. Of course it can. And a Jew has to learn to be Jewish not because the Gentile hates him and therefore force him to be a Jew, but for positive reasons. For Judaism. For Torah. It's so magnificent. He threw it away. Don't throw it away. Go back to being Jewish. Really Jewish. And that begins with study. You can't be a good Jew if you're an ignorant Jew. You don't know how to be a good Jew. Find a rabbi, a real rabbi. It's hard. I understand. But there are. I'm going to Chabad. That's a great, great place. And I'm not Chabad. Believe me, I'm not. But I'm honest. And they're good people. And above all, they're honest people. Go sit down and study. Sit down and see what our Zaydas and Bubbas had for centuries before there was a UJA. What kept them Jewish? Study it. It's magnificent. It's magnificent. And you young people here, I know if you go to school or to college, if you do this summer, take off for the summer and go to Israel. Go to Israel. Go to yeshiva. If you don't like it, quit. If you do, stay. In fact, don't come back. Get married there. Have babies. Have a lot of babies. A lot of babies. Every baby's a gem. Every Jewish child is a gem. Live on a settlement in Judea and Samaria. Walk on the same pebbles, on the same rocks, on the same earth that Abraham did. And watch that settlement grow into a town, in a village. And someday you'll sit with your grandchildren speaking Hebrew to them. And you tell them the story of how it was when you came and there was nothing and now there was this town. And they'll look at you and say, Eza Saba, Eza Savta. What a grandmother. And then you know what Jewish nachas is. The worst hell is to grow old and look back upon a life that was wasted. And to look back and say, what did I do? What was it all about? That's hell. And paradise and joy is to look back upon a life that may have been very, very difficult, but in which you did great things. So do great things. Do great things. And I want to finish with one word, Edvar Torah. I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi. Yes, Mort. Yes, Mort. I'm a rabbi. The Talmud tells us that when the Jews were about to receive the Torah, all the mountains, the tallest and the highest mountains, rushed forward to God, and each one pleaded with God, give me the honor. I want the honor of having the Torah given on my peak. And God said, no, I have a small mountain, and its name is Sinai, and I'm going to give it on that peak. And the reason is, I want to teach the Jews to be humble. And that's the end of that story in Talmud. It's a nice story. Mort loves that kind of a story. He's basically a humble man. With every reason to be. Now, the Gera Rebbe, who was a great, great scholar and also a smart man, studied this little story in the Talmud, and he asked the following question, and it's a good question. He said, if God wanted to teach the Jews to be humble, why didn't he give the Torah in a valley? Now, come on, I'm honest, isn't that a good question? You don't get more humble than a valley. That's about the lowest that you can possibly get. Good question. He also gave a good answer. And this was his answer. He said, well, God wanted to teach the Jews two lessons. One, be humble. Two, don't be too humble. Never be a valley. Don't let anyone step on you. Don't be obsessed with being loved. Not love, respect. Respect. Love us after every Holocaust. You go to Holocaust commissions and monuments and plaques and requiem masses at St. Patrick's. I'm sick and tired of that. I'm sick and tired of Kaddish and yard sites. I want to live. And if that means that they won't love me, too bad. I want respect. Don't want respect, I demand respect. And you don't get respect unless you have self-respect. Have self-respect. Have Jewish pride and have Jewish knowledge. And we have it in our power. In this era, this messianic era, when God has performed for us miracles greater than those that we have seen in 3,000 years, we have in our power, if we're the kinds of Jews that we should be, to bring the Messiah in our days hastily. Amen. Amen.